If I could start with you, Colin Sutton, are the police still keeping Britain safe?
I think they are, to a large degree. I think there is a vast number of brave young men and women who want to do that. They're having increasing difficulty, I think, in getting past some of the hoops that they're made to jump through in trying to do the job in the calling that they've signed up to do. I think it's we see it in other organisations, the NHS and things like that. The people who actually deliver the service at the sharp end are the ones who want to get on and to do what they think they're paid for. But sometimes those who set the strategies have other ideas.
What are your thoughts on this, Di Davies? Many out there in the public feel that the police are focused on the wrong things at the moment.
Well, I tend to agree. There's been a 3-year review by an eminent individual. It started in 2019 and it's just reported with 56 recommendations. I think at senior level there's a recognition that the police throughout the country are losing, to some extent, the confidence of the men and women that we're meant to serve. I agree with Colin. The front end, many of them are exceptionally brave and they just want to get on and do the job. But, you know, the last Royal Commission was in 1960. I think this, and if you go through the recommendations, there are 56 from memory. And one of the key ones is crime prevention. The other one is to protect the vulnerable. And a lot of people talk about this, but I don't see a huge sign in forces taking this on board, particularly in domestic violence and attacks against women. There is a dreadful record of failure in terms of rape, in terms of domestic violence and other sexual offences, mostly against women. And if I was a chief constable, that would be my priority, and we're not putting it at the level it should be. But it's not just the police, it's the CPS, it's the crime commissioners, that other load of nonsense that was brought on by this government, along with getting rid of very, very experienced officers. And what you often have on the front line are very inexperienced officers, led sometimes by sergeants and inspectors who themselves are not particularly, as it were, professional, because they haven't had the training or the time on the streets. You know, I had 12 or 13 years before I was an inspector, and so on and so forth. You knew your job because you stayed on the streets and you policed the streets, and that's where you need proper coppering.
And Di Davies, what are your thoughts about the policing of so-called hate crimes, such as an offensive Facebook post or tweet?
Well, it would have to take its priority along with others, including stabbings, violent attacks against men and women, and as I say, violence against women in every shape and form. That's the one area, you know, half this nation are women. And if we can't look after our women as men, and I'm sorry if that sounds sexist, there's something wrong with us as policemen and women. They have to have priority. So do the courts. I'm fed up with hearing lessons have been learned when I hear of child abuse. And I was an ambassador for a child protection unit for many, many years. I'm fed up of hearing we've learned lessons. And I'm fed up of chief constables telling me, like the Greater Manchester, the scandal there is appalling. And yet what we do, we give knighthoods to these chief constables. We give them all kinds of medals. If they were running an organisation, they would be sacked because their performance is so appallingly poor. Not in all cases, but in many cases.
And Colin Sutton, we learned just a couple of months ago, we discussed it on this programme, that less than 10% of burglaries are actually followed up by the police, and a fraction, a tiny number, are prosecuted.
Yeah, it's the number of officers available to respond has been dramatically reduced as a result of the cuts over the last 10 or 12 years. And it's not just a matter of pure numbers, it's what those officers are doing. And at the same time, we've seen this reduction in support services, such as for mental health, such as for children's services and things like that. And so much of these response officers' time is being taken up by dealing with people in mental health crisis, by waiting around at hospitals, waiting for somebody to assess the person they've brought in. Those police officers should be there to the hospital, back on the streets again. You know, I said to someone a little while ago, they say you never see a policeman on the street. Say, well, pop down to your local A&E, because you'll always see a police vehicle or two outside there, because that's where police are all the time. So it's not just entirely a policing problem, I suppose. You know, it's the Easter weekend. Social services, mental health services will have finished at 5 o'clock by and large on Thursday, and they won't be back until next Tuesday. Who covers that void over this long weekend? Everything falls to the police, it seems. And because they care, as a service and as individuals they care, they will respond and they will do their best, but they're not trained to do it, and it's diverting them from what many would see as their primary objectives.
So, Colin, do you not think the culture of British policing has changed since you were a detective chief inspector? Don't you think that criminals see the police now as a soft touch?
I'm not sure they see the police as a soft touch. I spent many years trying to fathom out how criminals think, and I never really got there. But I'm certain that the culture has changed. The culture changed in the 30 years that I served, and in the 10 years or so since I left, it's changed again. And that's probably a good thing, that culture has to change as the culture of society changes, I suppose. But the essential point is that we still have young men and women coming forward wanting to serve their communities. And we as a community, as a society, need to make sure that they're given the equipment, the resources and the strategic backing to do that job and to serve their communities in the way they'd like to.
But Colin Sutton, staying on the culture of British policing, don't you think they've gone a bit PC, no pun intended? They've gone a bit woke, dancing at these kind of, you know, rather dramatic demonstrations, including Extinction Rebellion and BLM. We've got rainbows expensively painted onto police cars. And we've also got Extinction Rebellion having police officers asking them, or Insulate Britain, are you all right sat on that motorway? Do you want water? Do you want something to eat?
Well, I mean, it's, you know, engagement with the community has always been important. I think it goes too far, personally. I'm sure there are others that will disagree with that. But yes, I think it goes too far. In terms of the way in which protesters are treated, that's largely a product of decisions made within our courts. You know, this is why these protesters aren't being arrested en masse for highway obstruction, because the courts in their wisdom have decided that it's a human right to be able to obstruct the streets to protest.
But Colin, why are cops dancing with them, laughing and joking and offering them a cup of tea?
Well, I'm not sure they offer them a cup of tea. I think I've heard them offer them water and are you all right? And they say that's because there is this...
Who cares if they're all right? They're blocking the M25.
But there's been this litigious culture that's saying that once a person is in police custody, and that's drawn very widely, then the police are responsible for their well-being. And so they're instructed to make sure that these people out there are well. And you know, that might sound daft to many, many people, but that's actually how the law has been interpreted, and that's how the instructions to police are. And you know, if we don't want that, then really we need to make sure that those laws are changed and that these decisions aren't arrived at by people who aren't actually doing the job there and then. You know, but there are many things, I suspect, that the general public and the average man or woman in the street would find really, really bizarre about how the law has evolved over the last few years in this country.
I've just received an email, Di Davies, from Shane, who's an Irishman. He says, "Hi, Mark, it's a horrible gesture having rainbows on police cars. As an Irish person, I'm sick of having the rainbow stolen. It was a symbol of Ireland as a famous pint of Guinness and had pot of gold at the end of it, not something rather more X-rated," says Shane. So it's time to reclaim the rainbow, especially since it now stands for uniformity and exclusion. It's not the job of the police to partake in ideological shaping of society. That's the role of the security apparatus in an authoritarian state, the thought police. What do you think about the culture of British policing? Has it gone a bit woke?
Well, yes, from what I see, and I've got even more experience than Colin. I'm 53 years now, which is quite a long time, and certainly since I joined in the 60s, it's almost unrecognisable in terms of leadership and all the rest of it. Yes, I agree. I don't think we should be involved in any kind of glorified woke or anything else. But, you know, there are simple things we could do to engender more money, and that is to amalgamate so many of the forces in this country into either regions. You could reshape and have a kind of FBI to deal with major crime. National issues such as, the crime agency and others could be amalgamated. There are so many aspects, including human resources, that if we joined up a lot of these forces, got rid of half of these senior officers, which are replicated in 43 forces, paid a lot of money by anyone's standards, and then we put that money back on the streets. You know, they've all got different uniform, clothing allowance, vehicle allowances. I could go on and on. We could save millions and translate that to put more officers on the streets. In my day, I would make my officers go out on night duty and bring in at least 3 or 4 arrests. And all they had to do was convince me or my sergeant there was credible cause. We would put them in the cell, and I or the sergeant would decide on the charges. Now it has a lengthy process. It's simply gone completely haywire as far as I'm concerned. And what it lacks is lack of courage in both the Home Office, the mayoral offices in many of these places, and the failure by commissioners, these civilian commissioners, to hold chief constables to account, to be more financially aware, to make sure. Look at Manchester. I keep going back to Manchester and Rotherham. You know, the guy in charge then was ignoring the issue, and yet they knighted him. I beggar's belief, and I've been at this half a century now, and all I see is failure. And in any other organisation at that level, you would be sacked.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows, and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.